I developed sepsis in 2023. I had an operation to remove some excess skin around the chest and down here, and just do some revision stuff. Fairly routine operation, 2 weeks recovery time, went really well, sorted. Back to work, nothing happened, like nothing had happened. We were in the middle of like some house changes and stuff, and we were getting a bathroom redone, and I got a spot on one of the scars, like just a normal, like you would say, like a whitehead. And I know now, looking back, like it was going really wrong there, but I just didn't think anything of it and was carrying on doing everything. But it was just that small little spot, like that is where it started in a wound. It was like nothing more than a whitehead. But and that was it. And that was just it. It was just a small little spot. That was it. Say it happened over about 2 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks. I had first thing I started just a little bit of fatigue. And then I think my temperature was gradually rising. I think my wife said, temperature's been a bit high, you feel, and just started sleeping a bit more. But as I went on now, I know I was developing like a bit of delirium, sort of like some altered sort of states of thinking. And I think for the last 7 days, I didn't sleep at all. Like I didn't sleep at all. And with me, I think it was just a tiredness, kind of a hyperactive tiredness, a franticness as well, which some people do get. I've heard now, because I think it's kind of like lack of oxygen to the brain over, but not a huge amount, but like a sustained amount. You're not really functioning properly. Yes, I just felt it was like a gradual kind of increase from a slight cold to, I think it reached a tipping point around about after 10, 12 days. I think that was the tipping point, was when it really rapidly accelerated. But by that point, I was in the wake of it, and I wasn't really functioning properly anyway. So you couldn't really do anything about it. It's once you're in it, kind of thing. But yeah, by the end of it, yeah, I hadn't slept in about 7 days, and I was very fatigued, like really fatigued, and aches and stuff. Felt like almost like flu at the start of it. So I was going for an annual review at my last job, and I drove in, and I did think, should I go or not? Because I'm not very well. But I went and managed to get through it. Came out, and I just said, look, I have to go home. I'm going to go home. And someone I was working with at the time said, you don't look all right. Are you okay? And I started shaking. And I remember phoning my wife in the car saying, have you got any, do we have anything stronger than paracetamol? Because I just can't. And it's just, you never ask for anything like that. You never ask for anything stronger than paracetamol, or even that. You're usually quite stoic. And so I get home, I'm taking to A&E. And then I got home, and from that point, she put me in the car. I think from on the car, I think I sort of switched off because I knew I wasn't driving. Then it really started to like I really started shaking very heavily. I think it's called Riger's or something like that. But it was very, very, like, shaking a lot. By the time I got to the doctor, I got to the A&E department. They checked me in, and about 10 minutes wait. But I went to triage, and I remember I said, they went for it. Said, am I going to go back out? She went, no, you're going straight to the ICU. And then like this team of doctors like bundled in and like put me on a stretcher and took me out. So I was in ICU 6 nights, came out on the 7th day. I live in Brockhall, so I went to our local hospital, A&E, and then I got taken to a larger hospital in Bradford. I remember asking the doctor, actually, the guy who did the operation, because what happened was they extricated from this part of my body. I think it was something like 6 liters of like white strep A pus. Like, so they had to open up a wound and extricate like 6 liters of strep A, which is actually it's a flesh-eating virus. Like, okay. But I said to him, I think after, can I go back to work on Monday? And he just looked at me and was like, no, you can't. You really, really can't go back to work. I don't think I was quite mentally like there at that time. But no, there's no thinking about it. I really wasn't mentally there at that point. Yeah, I didn't really know what to expect, because I'd had toxic shock a few years ago, but nothing like this. Like, I think it was like 2014, 2015, nothing like this. And I was about after a week, I was like, I was okay. I was a lot younger, I think, as well, with fitter as you will be as when you're sort of that much younger. But I think one thing I didn't expect was just actually how like your whole functioning just sort of ceases. Like I didn't expect that at all. So like I'm a bit uncoordinated at times, but you can't like you just not you're not functioning at all as a reading was really difficult. I used to read like every day. I didn't read at all. Even stuff like following like TV programs was really difficult. But yeah, I didn't know about post sepsis recovery, like what was actually going to happen. Yeah, that was quite hard. I didn't realize how much I'd grind to a halt, to be honest. I had the sepsis in June. I was still sort of going, but I developed something called functional neurological disorder. So basically, first seizure, I was paralyzed for like 2 hours, and it's a mixture of trauma and like brain inflammation where it takes a long time, and that was then like paralysis seizures on the left side and my arms and my hands, and you know um that's now died down, but I didn't like that sort of thing. So it was a relapse and recovery thing for a long time. In terms of the physical side of it, like the GPs kept a very close eye on me. Emotional side of it, I did get counselling from the UK Sepsis Trust, um, which was really good because you only really get a small amount on the NHS because it's just so outstretched. Um, I think my wife didn't take, I think that she helped me a lot, but it was hard on her as well. It was quite difficult. My daughter would have been 18 months old at that time. That's a lot to take on, and a husband that's out of the game, like completely out of the game, because you're just not functioning. You're just not functioning. Especially with the movement thing that came after it. But yeah, it was I think pretty much like just the whole thing of learning to just stop for a while was really difficult as well, because it takes a long time to mentally get over it. I'd say, like, to mentally bring this once you're physically done, to mentally get over it is another different thing. I'd just say stop. Like all the other bits, they are important, but they're not. Like, do you know what I mean? They are like the house, the cars, and the work, and this. They are important to a degree, but I suppose my perspective now is that I choose the value of those things, like, which I always have. Like that's a different thing. Like mindset is like I always have had the choice to determine whether that stuff, the value I put on it, but it's kind of not. They are more. They don't have the same sort of drive as they did. I think. I mean, I think one of the things that the mistakes I made, I would say, is that I got so with women that I got this idea from women that apparently have really traumatic births. They get their notes and they go through it with a nurse. I didn't have that. And I think after about 4 or 5 weeks, I got my notes from the hospital and started to go through them. But this was not a good idea. But and that was just not a good idea for me. Far too soon, far too soon. And I had a lot of help from the Sepsis Trust at that point, because it was too. You do have to sort of go through and unpack that trauma, but so soon afterwards definitely was not a good idea. Like, and no one really tells you that about sort of like psychology of trauma recovery. That sort of stuff is like you can't really deal with it until you've dealt with it enough to then go back and deal with it. Because if you do, it just pulls you apart. But yeah, that was quite scary. I think that the point is like, just stop and listen to your body actually as well. That kind of thing, like getting back into your body. But I think men are probably a lot worse in this than women. I don't know. I don't want to be sexist, but actually, like, you know, men aren't as in their bodies as women are. And I now, like, I've done a lot of recovery in terms of like doing yoga. That is very much the mind body connection, and it's completely different. Like, you really do know when something's going wrong now, which is important. But yeah, I think it was just stop, because it wasn't worth the sacrifice. It wasn't a sacrifice I consciously made, but if I would, you would go, forget it. It's just not worth it. Yeah. One of the things I think I religiously did, until I had this. I took my temperature 3 times a day, like religiously took my temperature 3 times a day, which isn't really normal. It's an understandable reaction, but if I look at how it is now, I don't take my temperature 3 times a day. And I made a checklist of what like health indicators, and that was sort of really, really paranoid sort of behaviour. But yeah, and then I think the knock-on effect was you have to sort of recover to a certain extent from the seizure disorder until you can actually get. I mean, you can't. I was in a really old state of mind. Like you forget what room I was walking into in the house. I got lost around like my local village. Cognitively, you couldn't function. Yeah, lost use of my limbs, my hands, speech. Really difficult. Really, really difficult. Getting over that part was really, really difficult. I couldn't work. I think actually you just couldn't. I just couldn't work. And that's just what it was. It's not actually that important. It is important in terms of the fact that you need to make a living, but in the moment, it's like, well, okay, I'll deal with that when I can deal with that. And yeah, I mean that you just for the year, I've only just started to get back to work now. It takes a lot of time. I originally thought, right, a month I'm going to have this licked, I'll be back and I'll be fine. And it's just not like that. Like, and you honestly believe you're going to be okay. Like, you honestly believe it'll be fine. I'll be all right. And I remember like a friend of mine's a GP, and he was like talking about. He said, I don't think you quite really understand the concept of what your body's gone through. You're not quite. I was just, oh, I'll be fine. And Naj, I don't really think you've got a grip on what actually happened. And I was like, but then actually when you start, you're like, oh, actually hold on a minute. Like I used to be able to run, probably go for a jog, 5 miles, 5, 6 miles. I was strong. Now like that for ages, that was just out of the picture. Like a walk around like the block was just, you'd be out of breath, and like up and down stairs, like probably for 4 or 5 months was just like out of the picture, completely out of the picture. That was gone. You know, like the fatigue was unbelievable. Like it completely knocks you out. Go easy on yourself, because actually I think you do more damage going back when you go more. You try and push yourself, it's worse in the long run. As a world is that I suppose you just look after yourself, and it's very finite. This thing you've got, like you walk around, especially I think you walk around as if you're invincible. Like if you do, I thought health was like a tick box thing. If you exercise regularly, you keep a fairly decent diet, and you do all these things, and it's just not like that. It's just not like that. But then, the stoic, sometimes it is good just to carry on and be resilient. Resilience can be a very bad thing, like because sometimes like actually your body's telling you need to stop, because actually it's just the only people I know. I think I always have some sleep problems, but the only people I know that can go to extreme sleep problems like that, they're kind of like sort of special forces or something like that, and even they don't have a really long shelf life in their job because it just catches, the body just can't do it. But if it is starting to slip down, just pay attention to it, because I think for me it crept up very quickly. If I look back, there were kind of warning signs of going, you just needed to slack off a bit. And yeah, just take the time to look after yourself a little bit, because when it goes wrong, it goes wrong. Like it's I think once you're in the final sort of 70% of the journey, it's sort of like being on an express train. It doesn't stop until it gets to the end of the line. Like those final 3 or 4 stops, if you're on the train, that's it. And you just got to hope you can sort of deal with it at the end of the journey. But I just remember, like, I remember distinctly lying in the hospital bed going, right, and I get what death feels like. You can feel it on an emotional, bone, physical level. Like it's you're in a space where it's like, this might actually be it. And yeah, I think one thing my wife said to me was, as they left, she had to go and pick up my daughter from nursery, who were brilliant. They were really, really good actually. But they said, look, just to let you know, he's in really bad condition. Like do not go away thinking that it's going to be that he's massively in bad condition. And she told me that, I think, like after a couple of months, she said, yeah, I walked out of hospital going, I might just get she was pretty going, I might get a phone call saying he's not done it. And then like the other time in the hospital was when they took me into the ICU and said, "You're gonna get really annoyed with us, but we're gonna be in it every half an hour, checking your vitals and checking your like, you know, and pumping you for." And then even the FND thing, it's like, you know, the journey's like 6-7 months recovery. You know, I'd say I still feel sometimes like I said to someone like halfway through it, I still feel like a child. Like, is it not like carefree? Is in like really, 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 really like on edge all the time. And that probably took 5 months to get out of that phase. I'd say probably 5 months of like major anxiety, like massively. You know, your body's coming back online. You know, you can start to think properly again. But that took me probably, that mental side of it took me probably 5 months to get over, I'd say.